the Civil Rights Act of 64 and the Voting Rights Act of 65. This, we refer to the Mitchell family as the Black Kennedys of Maryland. So welcome back, I think, Senator Mitchell, because you were with us before. Welcome back to Igniting Change.
I'm glad to be with you and joining you. I simply am known as a freedom fighter. And, when I hear Dr. K, and we have got to now just reinvigorate people and let them know that what is happening on a national level with the current occupant of the White House, Trump doesn't last always. We've got to recognize that with our voice, we can speak up and give a carrying sound to the protests that are happening all over this country. And every little bit helps. I want to let you know that you happen to mention about Malcolm X. I was fortunate to have spent some time with Malcolm X in 1963. As a young man, I was at the Fieldston School in New York City, and he came and spoke to a group of us there. And at the time, he invited me back to his place, and I was able to spend several days with him. And, of course, he and my father were good friends. And really it was an eye-opening for me because you got to remember in 1963, Malcolm X was still the fiery Malcolm X and was kind of persona non grata as far as the other organizations were concerned. But yet he was of incredible spirit to me. And the fact that he took time to listen to a young high school student like me, and this was the time when just in June of that year, Medgar Evers had been murdered, shot in the back in Mississippi. And I happened to hear the call from Merrily, his wife, to my father, announcing that he had been murdered. And then, to know that so that every voice can – we would have never been able to pass the 1964 civil rights legislation had it not been for people saying that if you speak out loud enough and long enough, people will listen to you and get hold of your individual representatives and never let no be an answer to anything. Now, I'm going to stop because I don't want to keep talking.
Woo-hoo!
But
you were raised.
You've got to invigorate yourselves to be a freedom fighter. Trump does not last always. And what he's doing now and get ready to vote. The midterm elections are coming, and we have the power. We're like beggars sitting on bags of gold. We have the power within ourselves to make a difference. We can go to the polls and change this whole Congress and turn it upside down. And then pack Trump and his minions and Musk are running. It is not coincidental that all of a sudden there have now been over 15,000 white South Africans who have taken the Trump invitation to leave South Africa and come to become privileged status in the United States. Well, this is a part of that whole racial element that wants to take charge again. And we've fought them and we beat them once. We can beat them again.
Absolutely. And I want to just say, and Daryl, as we get ready to introduce our next guest, let's be very clear, everybody. Trump trouble got to deal with our good trouble because we're bringing good trouble always in these halls and in these streets. Come on, Daryl. Let's introduce our next guest.
Oh, absolutely, Barbara. We're going to be talking about these museums. We're going to be talking about history. So we could think of no better person to talk about the importance of the museums, the importance of preserving our history, the importance of preserving the history in our communities than Miss Deborah Omowale Jarmon. She's from San Antonio, Texas. She's the Executive Director of the San Antonio African American Community Archive and Museum, SACAM, whose mission is to collect, archives, and to tell the stories of African American communities throughout the San Antonio area. Director Jarmon is overseeing a privately funded 100,000 square foot African American museum in downtown San Antonio, which upon its completion will be one of the largest African American museums in the United States. Ms. Jarmon, Ms. Omowale, welcome to your maiden voyage on Igniting Change.
Oh, my goodness, Daryl and Barbara, thank you so much for having me and for this historic, monumental conversation. I am going to echo what the other panelists said. We are in interesting times, but history shows us, one, we've been here before, so we know what to do, and most importantly, we know how the story ends. We just have to roll up our sleeves and do the work. We are in a little better position than we were economically in some areas as compared to 1964. But they're talking about this anti-wokeness. We as a people, we need to be awake, and we need to mobilize. Thank you. I look forward to this conversation.
All right. Woo-woo. I can tell you that when we met you in San Antonio back and during the Final Four weekend as we were there for the HBCU All-Stars program, that when we heard you speak and when we saw the products from your amazing work, it just blew us away that there's such a great museum on already in San Antonio, but ready to just really expand out and do such amazing work. Thank you for what you do. Folks, the Trump administration, as you've heard, has initiated a continued strategic assault on African Americans and African American history to remove our contributions from the walls of U.S. history. Let's be very clear. There's no U.S. history without America. There's no American history, no U.S. history without Black history. It's impossible. It's inseparable. It's so integral. Our contributions built this country, continue to lift it up. Everything that we do is part of our history and our exceptionally great excellence that Black people have brought to this country. So in order to destroy this record, they have passed a couple of executive orders. He has enlisted an executive order that seeks to destroy to dismantle the Institute of Museum and Library Services, IMLS. Fortunately, people have sued and are suing and will continue to sue, and we'll be right there with them. People, be quiet. We can hear you. And there was an injunction issued. And, yes, and he tried to fire, thank you, Carla Hayden. He has fired Carla Hayden, the librarian. We talked about her last week. And we want people to lift her up because she was excellent. And so it's not about, quote, efficiency. It's not about excellence because it's actually about white superiority, white dominance, and just lies. So what we wanted to do is to ask a couple, to ask these amazing guests some, questions. So first of all, I know that your time is really tight. Dr. Whitehead, can you tell us why it's important for Black people to become involved? I mean, each Black person. I'm not talking about just the, quote, activists. Why is it important to my audience, to everybody that's in their household, to be involved in the fight to preserve our museums and build our monuments?
Thank you so much, Barbara. As you mentioned in my open, I am the president of ASALH, the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, in addition to all the other roles that I have. But I sit in the seat of Carter G. Woodson, who launched Negro History. He talked early on about the importance of our children learning our history so they can be the ones to go out and teach other people, that we have to make sure that our children are built in such a way that they understand that our history, Black history, is uniquely a part of the American historical narrative. You can't write the American historical story without including the contributions of Black people. It starts with the work that we've done to actually build into the roots of who we are in this nation. It's not as easy as people would think to pull out the narrative of Black people. You do that by trying to suppress us. You do that by trying to break us. You do that by trying to lynch us. You do that by trying to enslave us. You do it every single way, but they always forget that we are very strong seeds and we will grow wherever we are planted. That you cannot completely uproot the American historical narrative without understanding you can't do that because Black people are uniquely tied to it. So we're teaching people and telling people and uplifting and amplifying for people that now more than ever, at least in modern history, we have a generations of people who don't understand the actual struggle. Now, like Mr. Mitchell talked about, my father was uniquely involved as well in the civil rights movement in South Carolina. And he used to spoon feed me my history with the peas and the cornbread. It's like, you know what, pass the biscuits and talk about your grandfather. You know, understand who we are and understand this narrative. And I think somewhere along the line there's been a disconnect with Gen X and these Gen Zers and millennials. It's almost as if we didn't spoon feed them the history. So now we're trying to do the back work of helping them to understand why our history is important. Because if we don't teach our history, if we don't understand our history, if we don't know our history, then we cannot expect anyone else to do so. We need to make sure that when we show up in these environments, we are Trojan horses for Black history. We may be showing up to talk about economics, we may be showing up to talk about finance, showing up to talk about housing, and we need to backstitch Black history in there every chance we get, because that's the unique story. And that's what we're doing in Asala, reminding people that Black history is not just February, and then you pick up white history March 1st until the end of January. Black history is 365 or 366, depending upon what is leap year. Black history is the history that it can be taught to talk about every single other narrative in this country. I also want to push out and just remind people that as they are attacking and putting injunctions and executive orders against all the advancements that they made, they are, in a sense, tearing down all the advancements that other marginalized groups have made through our work, whether it's women, whether it's brown people, whether it's people from a disabled community. All of those advances came after Black folks had done the work and laid down the foundation. It is the tearing down of America brick by brick, starting with Black history, because once you tear that down, everything else falls after that.
Wow. Daryl.
And, Carl, it's really interesting, Carl, because, one of the things that, Dr. Whitehead so eloquently lays out is the importance of African-American history and the preservation of the history. But one of the things that you've been working on with the Caucus of African-American Leaders in Maryland has been creating monuments to African Americans of significance to the state of Maryland and to the nation, and having it privately funded. Can you share with our audience what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how that factors in to this discussion of build your own wall if you want to have brothers on the wall?
It's really, Daryl, the legacy of Malcolm X. If Malcolm X stood for anything, he stood for the notion that Black people must do for themselves. There are things that only we can do for ourselves. And preserving our history is part of that. The sister eloquently pointed out why it is necessary to pass this information on to another generation. People listening to this program right now, if I were to say George Washington, they would immediately tell you who George Washington was, because they've been trained, indoctrinated, if you will, to who he was. You ask the same group of people who Madison Washington was, and it will come perplexed looks on their face. They've never heard of Madison Washington. They had never heard of Madison Washington, a man who literally freed more Black people than Abraham Lincoln. And there's a reason why the nation does not want people to know who Madison Washington was and other courageous people who've come this way. One of the things I really want to emphasize, I'm glad Senator Mitchell's on with us, because I want him to hear this from me personally as it relates to Perrin J. Mitchell. Congressman Mitchell was one of those rare human beings that came this way. As you know, he was the founder of the Congressional Black Caucus. He was one of the few elected officials that supported Shirley Chisholm when she ran for president of the United States. I have a great, deeper respect for Perrin J. Mitchell. And it's important that generations yet unborn know who he was. And the whole purpose here is to say, listen, we don't need to depend on other people to build our memorials. We will build them ourselves. When you build your own memorial, you get to inscribe on that memorial those things that you think are most important. If you go through the government has the final word. So I'm just delighted that you and others throughout Maryland have gotten on board, and Senator Mitchell needs to know this. We announced that we're going to build this memorial for Perrin Mitchell in January. By March, we collected $100,000 to build that memorial, and the memorial is now built. It's now in Annapolis, the capital of Maryland, and on May 28th at 1 p.m., there will be a ceremony in which we will unveil this memorial to Perrin J. Mitchell. And, Daryl, I conclude my remarks with this. I was in Baltimore, as I'm often asking to speak to a class. I was asked to speak to a class during Black History Month. And I was appalled when I asked the question who Perrin Mitchell was. There were students, high school students, who had no idea who Perrin Mitchell was. And I don't blame them. I blame us, those of us who are older